Despite what the fawning left-wing media would have you believe, China is still continuing to increase its push within our region. Yes, in spite of all the visits Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong make to the Pacific, China has not slowed its roll. We've now learnt that China is eyeing off purchasing a string of islands just off Papua New Guinea, aptly named the Conflict Islands. It's the kind of tactic we've come to expect from Beijing. But what is really concerning is that the owner of the island, Ian Gowrie-Smith, well, wait for this, he's personally appealed to Foreign Minister Penny Wong to put in a bid for the islands. It's a deep water place, the port, the runway, etc., but to no avail. It seems odd that the Australian government isn't more concerned about China further entrenching itself in the region and having the capacity to use the islands as a naval hub. Joining me now to discuss this is the Director of Defence and National Security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Michael Shoebridge. Great to see you, Michael. How are you?
Pretty good, Rowan, and you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate. And what do you make of the Conflict Islands? Great name. But, you know, it's Penny Wong had the opportunity. Apparently she hasn't returned Ian Gowrie-Smith's calls. He's nervous that he'll have to sell to the Chinese.
Well, Rowan, I think we've got to think differently about this. You know, the statement from the Foreign Affairs outfit was that this would just be a private sale dealt with through Papua New Guinea laws. Well, in a really narrow way, that's true. But we know that the Chinese state doesn't work like that. You know, Chinese companies that are called private companies act on behalf of the state, and what they do, they make available to the Chinese state to use. So we've got to start thinking, how do we remove the prospect of China using these islands for military and security purposes? And it's much better to prevent the problem than to have to deal with it after it's happened. Absolutely.
We've got the situation where we have the port of Darwin, which was leased out to a Chinese company, our most northern port. None of the boffins managed to spot, you know, none of them sat there and thought, I wonder if this is a good idea, Port of Darwin leasing it to China. Yeah, sign off on it, yeah. So we had that. You've got Penny Wong wandering around the Solomons and elsewhere, and we're going to spend squillions of dollars on climate change initiatives in the Solomons and in the South Pacific to stop the Chinese spending even more money. So we're prepared to do that. Here's a little island just off Papua New Guinea. It's less than 1,000 miles from Cairns. And we're going, oh, don't know what to do about that. What should we do? I don't know. Should we let the Chinese have it? I mean, this is extraordinary stuff. Surely we should just buy the place.
I don't think the Australian government would even have to do that. You know, there's a little bit of a model here with the Digicel transaction. Big mobile phone operator in Papua New Guinea in the South Pacific. Telstra acquired that company and it got export finance funding from the Australian government worth $1.3 billion US. Now, the private owner of these 21 atolls that are about 940 kilometres from Cairns says he wants $36 million for them. So imagine a government financing package that supports some outfit like the Nature Conservancy Trust to buy those islands and operate them as a protected sea turtle habitat. It wouldn't be a Chinese military facility, it'd be a sea turtle habitat. That's the kind of future this could have.
And yet nothing from our so-called Labor government with their concerns about China. Extraordinary. While we're talking about China, Michael, what did you make of the story a week or so ago about toys, basically Chinese toys? We know in the past there have been concerns about Huawei and other things like that. China, the article is claiming that China is committed to influencing our kids and stealing their private data. This is because of several companies that manufacture toys, kids' toys, that have now been taken over by a larger Chinese company. Are we being paranoid in thinking that the Chinese might be using the toys to spy on our kids? We've got the experience of TikTok, where data is retrieved by China. What do you think?
Well, I think this is really, the bigger issue here is computer games. So, you know, games like Assassin's Creed are made by a company where Tencent, the big Chinese digital outfit that also has a gaming arm, wants to increase its shareholding and wants to become, I think, the single largest foreign owner in that French company. And the problem there is gaming companies and gaming software are data collection opportunities on the users of the game's behaviour, their interactions with others, and also they're a way that people learn about the world. So the Chinese Communist Party directing how the game describes the world and the world's history to others creates an opportunity for the Chinese Communist Party to educate our children through these games. That's some of the disturbing aspects to this.
So you can almost imagine the kids sitting there playing the game, and the goodie is the Chinese Communist Xi Jinping guy, and the baddies are those dreadful white Australian colonialists down there in South China or whatever we're called. Michael.
How many parents know the details of what's in these games? Almost nobody. So it's an open field for the Chinese Communist Party.
What do you think? We've seen over the last year a lot of concerns about China, and we've seen the Chinese ambassador getting upset and saying, that Australia's done the wrong things and 14 demands and so on. Where does the relationship sit now that we've had Labor in power for 3 or 4 months? Have things changed?
Well, I think the Labor government suspected this when they were in opposition, that they could try to change the tone of the relationship and take some of the heat out of it. But the real change would need to happen in Beijing, and it just hasn't happened. Beijing is actually providing the same problem to many countries, not just Australia. And if we thought a new government here was going to change all that, we were always deluding ourselves. I think that is now pretty well understood in the new Labor government.
Do you share Jim Molan? I have a lot of time for Jim Molan. He's got a new book out, which he is very hawkish on China and saying it is a serious existential threat. What does the Australian Strategic Policy Institute make of Jim Molan's claims and, his fears?
Well, the good thing about the Strategic Policy Institute is there are many different people, so I can't speak for all of them. But I can say Jim Molan's primary diagnosis about the direction that China is taking, it's hard to disagree with. And that's because of the actions we see China taking in the world. If they don't have security ambitions in our near region, then what on earth is the Sogavare-Beijing deal all about? What was that regional security pact all about? And if they're not aggressive militarily, what did we just see around Taiwan? So the problem is words from Beijing don't matter nearly as much as their actions. And I think that's what Jim Molan is telling us.
And has there also been a sea change, if you like? I mean, you and I spoke about this a couple of years ago, about how companies like Qantas, for example, would not call Taiwan Taiwan. So there was this kind of deferential attitude in corporate Australia, as well as in some of the bureaucracies, as to, we mustn't upset the Chinese. So we saw what happened, you referred to the last couple of weeks with Taiwan. Do you think corporate Australia is starting to get wary of China? Are they starting to back Taiwan, or are they still going to just stay with this one pretense that Taiwan doesn't exist?
I think it's still a really patchy story with corporate Australia and academic Australia. I think a bunch of them know that they now really do need to diversify from their all-in bet on the China market. Others are still hoping that that's not true. And if they hold their breath long enough, they can get back to business as it used to be. Those ones that are holding their breath and hoping are going to run out of time because Beijing is on a clear trajectory under Xi.
Michael Shoebridge, always great to talk to you for your clear analysis on China and so much more. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.